Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you have not done so already, sign up for our Locked On Cougars Insider Group. It's a great way to interact with the show. Get your opportunity to win BYU tickets. I have a pair of tickets I purchased for podcast listeners, but it's a perk we've reserved for the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. If you want to have a chance to go out and watch the Cougars take on Southern Illinois this weekend, join a Locked On Cougars Insider Group and get in the mix today. You get a 14-day free trial, just $5 a month afterwards to support the podcast and get updates of what I'm hearing about BYU football. For example, yesterday morning, Locked On Cougars insiders knew who BYU's 14 captains were hours before the official announcement came from BYU. Comes to your phone in the form of a text message. You can interact with me one-on-one via text message as well. So sign up today. You click on the link in the show notes below, whether you're watching this on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, and join us on the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right. The Athletic has done a really, really good job covering college football top to bottom. I absolutely love the fact that they cover college football as heavily as they do. Well, Chris Vanini and Bruce Feldman, two of my favorite writers over at The Athletic, came out with their coaching tiers for the 2024 football season. Now, what this is essentially is breaking down where each head coach nationally fits in the pantheon of greatest to worst coaches. And there are 7 tiers that they have listed here. The top tier are national championship winners. There's quite literally only 2 members of that championship tier, tier 1 as they call it. Those are Kirby Smart and Dabo Swinney. Well, when you got national championship like they do in their trophy case, guess what? You get to be near the top. Now, Kyle Whittingham, Utah's arch nemesis, the former BYU alum himself, leading the University of Utah, he's in tier 2 this year as he leads the Utes hopefully towards a college football playoff berth, which BYU would love nothing more than to knock off the Huskies. Not the Huskies, the Utes. I just saw Washington scroll across my feeds. That's why I mentioned the Huskies, but they would love nothing more than knock off the Utes and keep them from making the college football playoff. But where does that have BYU head coach Kalani Sitake? Well, I can hear some of you out there grumbling, I should be in tier 7. I know that there's angst around Kalani. I get all that. But I think it was a measure of respect that BYU head coach Kalani Sitake was listed in tier 4 from Chris Vanini and Bruce Feldman. They said this about the group. This is the, quote, very solid group. They're not on the hot seat, and they'll rarely have a terrible season. Now, you can argue that 4-9 season that Kalani Sitake had in 2017 and 5-7 a season ago. Those might qualify as terrible seasons in your mind, but apparently not in this circumstance. It's also a group that sees a lot of movement. They mentioned that Neil Brown moves up 2 spots after taking West Virginia to a 9-4 season, coming up from tier 6 to tier 4. They don't really write anything about Kalani Sitake, but they have him in this tier. That's the middle of the road right here for Kalani Sitake. This season could go a long way to moving him up, moving him down, or keeping him right where he's at in this pantheon. But here's the coaches that are around him in this mix. Bill O'Brien from Boston College, who's a brand new head coach, who's coached in the college level before, obviously at Penn State. He's in this mix. Pat Narduzzi, the guy that seems to have a bone to pick with everybody, especially when it comes to players leaving his program via the transfer portal, he's on this list. Jeff Monken from Army, who's done a very, very good job. Reason I mentioned Washington is because Jed Fish is in this. He's actually jumped up 2 tiers into the mid-tier here. Mike Elko from Texas A&M, Dave Doran from NC State, Neil Brown, as you mentioned, from West Virginia, Brett Bielema from Illinois, and then Kurt Signetti from Indiana. Is that the caliber of coach that Kalani Sitake aspires to be? I don't think so. I think he absolutely aspires to be a top-tier, bona fide P5 coach. He wants to be a top-tier coach. Now, a lot of this is circumstance because I talked about this where guys can jump tiers 2 and 3 at a time if they have successful seasons. Let's say BYU puts together an 8-4 campaign against the type of season they're looking at. BYU is slated to face all 5 of the preseason top 25 teams in the Big 12 this season. It is a very, very tough schedule for BYU, but 4 of those teams come to Provo, Utah. That is an advantage for BYU. If you can handle your business at home and notch some upsets, that is going to change the whole tenor, I feel like, for this football program. And if BYU, let's say, were to kind of beat the odds, as it were, and go 8-4, it wouldn't surprise me to see Kalani Sitake in tier 3 next year. And if they were to just absolutely just blow the doors off everybody and, heaven forbid, go for 10 wins, yeah, I'd see him maybe in tier 2 at that point. I think this is a fair evaluation of where Kalani Sitake is at in his head coaching tenure. You may disagree, and I welcome your comments. Drop them in the show notes below, whether you're watching this on YouTube or you want to weigh in via social media. If you're listening to this regular podcast format, let us know. But I look at this as Kalani Sitake getting, I think, a fairly good evaluation overall. I mentioned some of you probably are grumbling, well, he should be like tier 6 and he should be on the hot seat. Kalani's done a fairly good job. And I also want to caution you guys, those of you who want Kalani Sitake out, for lack of a better term, who's the guy you're going to slate to replace him? Is it Jay Hill, who is his current deputy? Is it Kellen Moore from the NFL? You're going to be able to get BYU to pony up enough money to steal him from the NFL, a la Kevin Young, to the BYU basketball program via the NBA? It's going to cost a lot of money. Is BYU willing to dip back into that pool to pay, let's say, $6, $7 million, $8 million for a football head coach who's, by the way, been only a graduate assistant to my knowledge at the collegiate level? Speaking of Kellen Moore, I just don't know who the like-for-like replacement or an upgrade in terms of a replacement is for Kalani Sitake. Now, I'm not paid to make that decision. That is Tom Holmoe's decision. Obviously, he's BYU's athletic director. I'm sure that he's got a list of guys he would consider on that short list, but I don't think it's very long. And I just don't see anybody out there that tells me, you know what, in blaring lights, that's the guy BYU needs to go get if Kalani Sitake ain't it for the Cougars. This season will tell us a lot, I think, about Kalani Sitake. I think it will tell us a lot about his program as well. But I do think it's a little too early to consider that Kalani Sitake power 4 level, giving get out. I just don't see that being a tenable situation, especially for a university that is as unique as BYU is. But maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe Tom Holmoe has a plan that I am not privy to and I will never be privy to, but I just don't see that being good business on BYU side of things. All right, that's where I'll leave it for today's show. Coming up on tomorrow's show, we catch up with Connor Pay, talk about the season opener, talk about what he expects to be different for BYU this season. So stay tuned for that. Obviously, we'll be out there at practice later on this afternoon with media availability, so notes to come on that as well. So until tomorrow, everybody, thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And of course, thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here once again on the Locked On Cougars podcast.